My name is Julia Mayfield. I'm 32 years old, and if you'd told me 10 years ago that I'd be the legal owner of the very house my mother once stole from me, I would have laughed in your face. Or maybe cried instead. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of place with maple trees lining the streets, tidy lawns, and neighbors who smile a little too wide but gossip twice as hard. Our family was the picture of middle-class normal. Or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. Dad was the glue that held it all together. He was the quiet one, the peacemaker. The one who used to slip me $20 bills when Mom wasn't looking and whisper, "For your secret art supplies, Jules, keep dreaming." He was my safe place. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, I was only 19. It was like someone pulled the floor out from under me. I still remember the smell of stale coffee in the hospital waiting room, the scratchy blanket I wrapped around my shoulders, and Mom, dry-eyed, already talking about funeral costs and practical arrangements, while my sister, Erin, clung to her like a baby bird. Dad's will was simple. The small house he'd inherited from Grandpa, Mayfield, the old white craftsman on Maple Drive, was left to me. Not to both of us, just me. He knew. I think he knew Mom would try to mold me into her version of what a daughter should be. And that house was his way of giving me a corner of the world she couldn't touch. For a while, she didn't. She was too busy fussing over Erin, my younger sister, by 3 years. Erin was the golden child, always had been. Blonde hair, big blue eyes, the kind of girl who never had to ask for anything because it was already being handed to her on a silver platter. I learned young not to expect the same. Christmases were the worst. Erin tearing into shiny new gadgets, the latest phone, a new laptop for college. Me. A sensible winter coat, a box of tea, sometimes nothing at all except a card with my name spelled wrong, Juliana instead of Julia. A small thing, maybe, but small things add up when you're the afterthought. And yet, that little house felt like proof I mattered. I didn't live there yet, but just knowing it was mine, that Dad trusted me with it, made me feel seen. I'd stand on its creaky porch some weekends, just breathing in the old wood and the smell of the lilac bushes out front, dreaming about painting the shutters blue someday, maybe having an art studio in the sunroom. But dreams don't hold up well when you're alone with a mother like mine. After Dad's funeral, Mom started talking about family needs. At first, I didn't listen too closely. I was busy working 2 jobs and scraping by through community college, while Erin dropped out of school 3 times and always found her way back home. What I didn't know, not yet, was that Mom had plans for that house. Plans that didn't include me at all. I can still see her face the day she told me what she'd done, but I'll get to that later. All you need to know for now is this. The one thing my father left me was the one thing my mother took away. And I was too scared to fight her back then, at least. Funny thing about fear, though, it grows teeth if you starve it long enough. And by the time Thanksgiving came around all those years later, my fear had turned into something else entirely. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand just how easily a daughter can disappear in her own family, and what it takes to claw your way back. It's strange, isn't it, how you can feel a storm brewing long before the sky goes dark? Looking back, I think I always knew my mother would find a way to claim what wasn't hers. But denial is a powerful shield. You hold it up until it cracks in your own hands. I was 24 when I first sensed something wasn't right. I'd moved 2 hours away to Dayton, scraping by as a junior graphic designer, living in a shoebox apartment that smelled like old carpet and burnt toast. I was barely covering rent, but I held on to the idea that if things ever fell apart, at least I had Dad's house. That was my safety net, my anchor. Then came the phone call. Mom, chipper, as ever, asking if I'd mind sending her a copy of the house deed. She made up some excuse about just getting the paperwork organized for taxes. I felt that twist in my gut, that twist you get when you know someone's lying, but you want so badly to believe they're not. I didn't send the deed. I drove home that weekend instead. I remember pulling up to Maple Drive, parking across the street, and just staring. The lilac bushes were gone, replaced by piles of lumber and a cement mixer in the yard. The porch was half torn down. The old blue shutters I'd dreamed of painting were missing entirely. For a moment, I thought I had the wrong address. Inside, it looked even worse. Aaron was there, wearing paint-stained sweatpants and barking orders at some contractor in dusty boots. She hugged me like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just gutted the only piece of my father I had left. Mom came downstairs, her smile bright and sharp. She talked about family improvements, how the house was going to be better for everyone. She acted like she was doing me a favor, turning my inheritance into a real home for Erin and her boyfriend, who had just gotten laid off for the second time in a year. I stood in that gutted hallway, drywall dust clinging to my coat, and felt the floor tilt under me. When I asked why no one had told me, Mom brushed me off. She said I didn't need to worry about things I couldn't afford to maintain anyway. She said it would still be mine technically, but that I should be grateful they were adding value to it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the deed and wave it in her face, but I didn't. I just stood there, nodding like the dutiful daughter I'd been trained to be. The drive back to Dayton that night felt endless. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, replaying every tiny memory of Dad handing me that folded envelope, telling me, "This is yours, Jules, always." For weeks after, I tried to convince myself there had to be a misunderstanding. I made excuses for them. Maybe they'd pay me back? Maybe they'd let me move in if I ever needed to. But every call to Mom ended the same sweet half-truths and deflections, the topic changing before I could pin her down. One night, when sleep wouldn't come, I did something I'd never dared before. I dug out Dad's old lawyer's card. Mr. Sheldon, he'd handled the estate when Dad passed. I still had his number, tucked in a box with faded photos and my father's funeral program. The next morning, I called him. I didn't expect him to remember me, but he did. The quiet daughter who'd signed papers without asking questions. He agreed to meet me for coffee at a diner off I-70. I sat across from him, stirring cold coffee, my hands trembling under the table. He told me the truth in that plain, matter-of-fact lawyer way. The house was still legally mine. My mother hadn't transferred the title, probably because she couldn't, not without forging my signature. But she'd taken out a home equity loan against it, putting it up as collateral to pay for Aaron's renovations. The words sank into my skin like ice water. It didn't matter if I lived there or not. My name was on the deed, so the debt was tied to me, too. If they defaulted, I'd be the one holding the bag. I felt so stupid, so embarrassingly naive for thinking they'd ever protect me. Mr. Sheldon patted my hand across the table, said I had every right to reclaim the house, maybe even press charges for fraud. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I was scared of the fallout. Scared of being the bad daughter who tore the family apart? So I did what I'd always done. I swallowed it. I went back to Dayton, threw myself into work, and let my resentment fester in the quiet spaces between paychecks and microwave dinners. But secrets rot when you bury them. And somewhere deep down, I knew a day would come when I'd have to dig this one up. I didn't know then that day would be Thanksgiving. Years later, in that same living room, with the smell of turkey and betrayal hanging in the air. The years that followed felt like walking around with a stone lodged in my chest. I built a life in Dayton, piece by piece, promotion by promotion. I stopped answering my mother's calls so quickly. I kept my visits home short, polite, and as numb as I could manage. Sometimes I'd drive by the old house on Maple Drive just to torture myself. It looked so different, bigger, shinier, stripped of every trace of my father's gentle hand. Aaron's boyfriend, then fiancé, then husband, turned the yard into a parking lot for his battered trucks. The lilac bushes I used to sketch as a teenager were long gone, replaced by gravel and a shed he built without a permit. Aaron would send me the occasional text, little photos of her new kitchen backsplash, the nursery she painted when she got pregnant, the back deck where they hosted barbecues for all the people who never once remembered whose name was really on the deed. I'd scroll through those photos in bed after another 12-hour day at the agency. Half sick with anger I never let out loud. I started telling myself I didn't care. I had my own apartment, my own savings, my own life. But late at night, when the lights were out, I'd catch myself replaying the last conversation I had with Mr. Sheldon, the lawyer. His voice reminding me I could claim it all back any time I wanted, that I had every legal right. Sometimes I'd draft emails to a new real estate attorney and then delete them before I could hit send. I wasn't ready to light that match. Not yet. Then, last fall, Erin called me out of the blue. We hadn't spoken in months. Her voice was sweet, overly warm, the way it always got when she wanted something. She started with small talk, her daughter starting kindergarten, how mom's sciatica was acting up. I waited for the hook, the reason she was really calling. And there it was, Thanksgiving. She wanted me to come home. Home. That word caught in my throat. She said they were hosting this year. It would be the first big family gathering since Dad died that would be at the Maple Drive house. The same house that was mine on paper. There's in every other sense. I don't remember saying yes exactly. It was more like she steamrolled right over my hesitation. Before I knew it, she was texting me photos of the menu, assigning me to bring pies, asking if I could come early to help set up. In the days leading up to it, I felt a simmer under my skin, the kind of restlessness you get when you know you're about to do something irreversible. I booked the cheapest rental car I could find and drove back along I-70, my stomach in knots the whole way. When I pulled up to the house that morning, the sky was a dull November gray. I sat in the car for a few minutes, just staring at the bright white siding, the new shutters painted a bland HGTV gray, the tacky wreath on the door. It looked so normal, so middle class, perfect. Like nothing rotten had ever grown behind those walls. Inside, the smell of turkey and cinnamon candles punched me in the face. Erin greeted me in an apron, cheeks flushed, acting like we were best friends who talked every week. Mom was already there too, sitting at the new granite island she'd apparently picked out herself with my inheritance. I nodded along through the fake smiles, the chit-chat, the careful dance of family politics. I let Erin's daughter tug on my sleeve, show me her finger paintings. I let Mom corner me near the fridge and tell me how proud she was of how hard I'd worked on my own. What none of them saw, what they never bothered to notice, was that I'd come prepared. Months earlier, I'd finally done what I'd been too afraid to do. I found a new lawyer. I paid him out of my own savings to dig up every paper trail. Title records, loan documents, proof that my mother had leveraged my property for a renovation she never asked my permission for. I knew exactly how bad it would look if it ever came to court. I watched them that day, moving around my house like it was their God-given right. Erin's husband opened a bottle of wine he couldn't pronounce. Mom bragged about the custom countertops. I sat there quietly, carving turkey and passing the mashed potatoes. And all the while, my fingers itched to speak the truth they'd buried for years. Somewhere between pumpkin pie and coffee, Mom raised a toast. She thanked Erin and her husband for opening their beautiful home to the family. She shot me this quick, dismissive smile, the same one she always used when she wanted me to sit down, shut up, and be grateful for scraps. But this time, something in me snapped. Or maybe it finally snapped into place. For years, I'd let them tell the story. I'd let them polish my father right out of the picture, right out of those walls. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt angry. And anger, I've learned, is just grief that's done being quiet. So I cleared my throat, tapped my glass, and when they turned to look at me, I felt a calm I hadn't felt since I was 19. Sitting on that porch next to Dad, while he told me I'd always have a place of my own. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said what needed to be said. And for the first time in my life, my mother went pale. At first, nobody moved. The clinking of forks stopped midair. My uncle, who'd flown in from Chicago, let out this awkward laugh like he thought I was making a joke. But I didn't flinch. I just sat there, napkin in my lap, the air between me and my mother sharp enough to draw blood. Mom opened her mouth, maybe to scold me, maybe to deny it, but nothing came out. Aaron's husband, always the loudest voice in the room, asked what I meant. I looked him dead in the eye and said it again, clearer this time, that the deed never changed hands, that the house everyone was sitting in was legally mine, that every holiday they'd hosted here, every barbecue, every playdate, all of it happened under my name. Erin set her wine glass down so hard, the stem snapped. I didn't even jump. I watched her eyes flick to Mom, searching for the version of the story that would make this all okay. But Mom had nothing. She was too busy trying to remember which lie she'd told to who. The room filled with nervous coughs and chairs scraping against the floor. The smell of pie and cinnamon felt sour in my throat. I wanted to feel guilty for ruining the holiday, for pulling back the curtain like that. But all I felt was a strange, hollow relief. Years of secrets rattling loose at once. Someone asked what I planned to do. A cousin, I think. His question floated there between the mashed potatoes and the candles that flickered like they might snuff out at any second. I told them the truth. I hadn't decided yet. Maybe I'd sell the house outright. Maybe I'd keep it and let them stay for a price. Erin's face crumpled, her hand flying to her chest like I'd stabbed her. She sputtered something about her kids, about how they'd have nowhere to go. Mom shot me this look that was half venom, half desperate plea. I didn't waver. I reminded them that they'd made choices. Choices that ignored me. Choices that cost me my inheritance, while they renovated bedrooms and granite countertops. I reminded Mom that she signed loan papers using a property that didn't belong to her. Her mouth twitched, but she didn't deny it. It's funny how quiet a house gets when the truth walks in. I could hear the old pipes rattle in the basement, the creak of the dining room floorboards under Uncle Joe's shifting feet. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody offered me the empty comfort they used to. And I didn't want it. Not anymore. When the plates were finally cleared, Mom cornered me by the back door. The kitchen smelled like scorched gravy and panic. She leaned in, her perfume too sweet, her eyes wild. She asked if I really meant to humiliate her like that on Thanksgiving, in front of family. Her voice cracked on the word family, like it was a shield she thought could still protect her. I told her I hadn't humiliated her. She'd done that herself. All I did was tell the truth. Her hand twitched at her side, like she wanted to slap me, or maybe hug me, but she did neither. Behind her, Erin hovered near the fridge, arms crossed over her chest, eyes red but dry. She didn't beg. She didn't apologize. Maybe she still thought Mom would fix it for her, the way she always had. I told them both that I'd have my lawyer draw up new terms. That if they wanted to stay, they'd need my permission in writing. If they wanted to refinance, they'd need my signature. If they wanted to pretend we were still a perfect family, they'd need to start by treating me like a real person, not a doormat with a dead man's name on the deed. Neither of them said a word when I grabbed my coat. I walked out through the living room where the rest of the family was pretending to argue about football to avoid looking at me. My uncle nodded once, like he understood more than he'd ever said out loud. Outside, the night was cold enough to burn my cheeks. I stood on the porch, my porch breathing in the air like I was tasting it for the first time. The house looked different in the dark. Not the bright, showy fortress they'd built with my money, but something older. Something that still remembered my father's voice, my father's hope for me. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just about the walls or the roof or the paper trail. It was about my spine, the one they'd bent for years, and how straight it felt now that I'd finally said the words out loud. I didn't know yet what I'd do next, whether I'd let them stay or force them out or tear the place down to its bones. But, for the first time in my life, it was my choice. And that was enough. Back in my car, I sat behind the wheel for a while, fingers numb, heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. I could almost hear Dad's voice in the back of my mind, telling me he was proud. Telling me it was about damn time. I started the engine, pulled away from the curb, watched the house shrink in my rearview mirror, until all I could see were the streetlights catching in the frost on the lawn. The road stretched ahead, mine, just like the house, just like my story, and for the first time in years, I felt it. The weight lifting, the stone loosening from my chest. The freedom that comes when you stop letting other people write your ending for you. I didn't sleep that night. Back in my tiny apartment, I left my coat draped over the chair like I might need to run again at any second. The silence buzzed in my ears louder than the traffic outside. It wasn't fear this time. Not exactly. But something restless, like my bones were bracing for an earthquake that hadn't hit yet. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Erin? The screen lit up with her photo from some summer years ago, when we still pretended to be sisters who shared everything. I let it ring. Then again. I watched the calls stack up like falling dominoes until she finally gave up. No voicemail. Just that lingering, guilty static. In the morning, I made myself coffee I didn't really drink and opened my laptop. I stared at my lawyer's email draft for almost an hour before I hit send. It felt like lighting a match in a house full of gas fumes. There was no undoing it now. The next few days moved like wet concrete. Erin texted me so many times I had to mute her. Long messages swinging between begging and blaming about the kids. About how they'd have to move schools. About how Mom wasn't well enough to handle the stress. No apologies, though. Not once did she say she was sorry for the years she lived in my shadow while calling it hers. Mom, on the other hand, went quiet. Deathly quiet. She didn't call, didn't show up at my door, didn't send one of her dramatic, guilt-drenched letters, the way she had when I first moved out, years ago. I wondered if she was busy trying to spin a new version of the truth, one that might save face with the rest of the family. Word got around fast, of course. Aunts I hadn't seen in a decade sent me cautious, half-sympathetic Facebook messages. Some cousins liked my posts, like they were checking a box, as if a tiny thumbs up could erase the fact that they'd all sat in my dining room for years and never once asked why I never stayed the night. I told no one about the meeting I set up with my lawyer. I drove back to Columbus on a Tuesday, in the same battered Honda I'd bought at 20, the one that had limped me through too many winter storms. The law office smelled like floor polish and printer ink, neutral, clinical, like the opposite of my mother's suffocating living room. My lawyer laid it out plain. If they wanted to stay, there would need to be a contract, rent payments, a timeline, repairs to be covered by them, not tacked onto my name like before. If they defaulted, they'd be out legally. No sob stories, no whispered phone calls about family loyalty. When I signed the first draft, my hand didn't shake. I almost expected it to. I'd spent so many years conditioned to keep the peace, to swallow every unfair thing in silence. But this time, my signature felt like drawing a line in wet cement. Permanent, uncrossable. Later that night, Erin called again. This time I picked up. She jumped straight in. No, hello. No, how are you? Just panic and that thin edge of entitlement that had always lived in her voice. She asked how I could do this to her, to the kids, to Mom. Her words came out in a rush, all tangled together. I let her talk. I let her run out of breath. Then I told her the truth I'd been trying to say for a decade, that it wasn't my job to fix what they broke. That Dad left that house to me for a reason, because he knew. Because maybe deep down he'd seen how easily my mother would choose one child over the other. Erin's silence on the other end felt like static. And then, so small, I almost didn't catch it. She asked what would happen if they couldn't pay. Her voice cracked on the word pay like she'd never tasted it before. I said that was her decision, not mine. For once in my life, it wasn't my burden to carry. When we hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. They're just empty in that clean, necessary way you feel when you finally dig out a splinter that's been festering under your skin for years. A week later, the papers went out. Mom didn't sign right away. She sent word through Erin, claiming she needed more time, that I was pushing her too fast. I held firm. Deadlines, terms, consequences, all written in black and white, the way they'd never let my voice be. Some nights, the doubt still creeps in. I wonder if I'm cruel, if I'm heartless for making my own mother ask permission to stay under the roof she once gutted behind my back. But then I think about the girl I was at 19, standing on that porch with big ideas and no armor. I think about how easily they used me, year after year, and how they would have kept using me if I'd stayed quiet. This is my quiet now. Not silence born of fear, but silence made of boundaries, of knowing where I start and they end. What happens next? I don't know exactly. Maybe they'll find a way to pay me what they owe. Maybe they'll pack up that big shiny life they built with my inheritance and learn how to build something of their own. Either way, the story is finally mine to tell. Winter came early that year. By December, icy wind scraped against my apartment windows like it was trying to get in and test how strong I'd really become. Some days I wondered if the cold was coming from outside or if it was just the leftover frost between me and the people who used to call themselves my family. A few distant relatives reached out in quiet ways. An old cousin messaged me late one night, not to take sides but to say she always knew I was the one who got the short end, the one who never raised her hand to ask for more. I read her message twice, then shut my phone off. It felt like too little too late. Erin stopped calling after the papers were signed. I imagined her and her husband sitting in that big kitchen, the one my father never lived to see, trying to work out how to cover the rent I now had every right to collect. Sometimes I felt a sting of guilt, until I remembered the girl who skipped dinners to afford her own textbooks, while her mother bragged about granite countertops bought with someone else's name. Mom stayed silent the longest. I heard through the grapevine that she'd told people I'd turned cold, that I'd betrayed her, that I'd twisted the truth for money. The story always changes when the spotlight shifts, doesn't it? But deep down, I think she knew. She had to know that this time, the truth had teeth. When Christmas came, I didn't go back. I spent the day in my apartment with a cheap bottle of wine and a half-frozen pizza, watching the snow swirl around the streetlights outside. And for once, I didn't feel lonely. I felt something closer to clean. Like the old rot had been cut out, and what was left could finally breathe. One night in January, Erin knocked on my door. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. She stood there in my hallway, wrapped in a coat too thin for the snow, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She didn't step inside. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just said they were trying, that they'd scraped together the first payment. Her voice cracked when she said it, like she'd never expected she'd need my permission to live in what she thought was her kingdom. I didn't gloat. I didn't twist the knife. I just nodded. She handed me an envelope, cash, neat, and counted, and looked me in the eyes for maybe the first time in our entire lives. I saw her flinch at my calm, at how much I'd changed. I think that was the night I realized what I'd really won back wasn't just money or a piece of land with old pipes and creaky stairs. It was the weight I'd been carrying for every Christmas when I got nothing but a polite smile. Every birthday when Mom said they'd make it up to me next year. Every time they told me I was fine on my own because I was the strong one. They thought I'd be too strong to need what was mine. They didn't expect me to fight for it when it cost comfort and pretty lies. But the thing about being the strong one is this. Eventually, you stop being afraid to use that strength for yourself. In the weeks that followed, I went back to Maple Drive alone. This time, no family dinner, no fake smiles. I stood on the porch and traced my finger along the frame of the door Dad had painted himself. The house still felt like him in the quiet corners, in the way the floorboards creaked just right, in the smell of old wood under fresh paint. I hired a contractor to check the roof, something no one had bothered to do in years. I found old photos of the lilac bushes and made plans to replant them come spring. Not because I needed to move in, I didn't. But because I wanted the house to remember whose it really was. Mom finally called in late February. No apology. Just a stiff question. How long did I plan to keep them on the hook? I told her as long as it took for her to understand she wasn't the landlord anymore. I almost heard her swallow her pride through the phone. She tried to say something about family sticking together. I cut her off. Family does stick together, but family doesn't steal what's yours and call it love. After we hung up, I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from my own mouth in years. It wasn't bitterness this time. It was freedom, pure and simple. The truth is, none of this fixed what they broke. It didn't rebuild the years I spent feeling like a shadow. But it stitched something back together inside me, piece by piece, like old wood beams you shore up so the whole house doesn't collapse. I don't know if I'll ever live there again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, but I know this. If I ever do, it'll be on my terms. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to stand in the doorway and breathe easy. And when spring comes, I'll plant those lilacs. I'll watch them bloom like they did when Dad was alive. Proof that some roots survive even when people try to rip them out. Maybe it's funny to some people to care this much about an old house with peeling paint and pipes that groan in the winter. But for me, that place has never been just walls and windows. It's always been the promise my dad made to me the night he handed over that battered envelope with the deed inside, that I'd always have something no one could take, except they tried. And for a long time, they almost did. Not just the house, but the part of me that knew I was allowed to want things for myself. In March, I went back one more time. I brought fresh notebooks and a thermos of cheap coffee, just like I used to when I was 17, and dreaming about the life I'd build far away from the shadows of that living room. I sat on the dusty floor of what used to be the sunroom, now just a drafty corner filled with boxes Aaron never bothered to unpack. Sunlight slanted through the glass, catching on old spiderwebs. It was perfect in its imperfection. I wrote down everything I wanted, not just about the house, but about me. Things I'd put off for too long because I'd always been the practical one, the dependable one, the good daughter who made do with scraps, while her sister picked from the best cuts. I wrote about repainting the shutters, the shade of blue my dad once talked about. About maybe turning the attic into an art studio, not to prove anything, but just because I want it. People think revenge is loud. They think it's slamming doors and shouting matches and someone storming off into the night. But that's not what this felt like. This felt like a door clicking shut in the back of my mind. The door where I'd stored all my swallowed words, my second guesses, my fear of being too much. And on the other side was this quiet, stubborn peace that said, "It's yours. You get to decide who comes in and who stays out." It took them a while, but Erin and her husband made the first payment on time again. Mom hasn't called in weeks, maybe because she knows any conversation now happens on my terms. I hear things through distant relatives, little murmurs that they're adjusting. I wish them well, truly. But I won't let their comfort come before my boundaries ever again. Some nights, I still lie awake wondering how different things could have been if Dad had lived longer. Maybe he would have protected me more fiercely. Or maybe he did, in the only way he knew how, by planting a seed deep enough that it could grow even under someone else's thumb. And now, when I pull up to Maple Drive and sit in my car, I don't feel bitterness tightening my chest anymore. I feel possibility. I see the lilac bushes I'll replant with my own hands. I see laughter echoing through the hallway again, not forced, not wrapped in guilt or obligation, but real, chosen. If you'd asked me at 19 if I thought I'd ever stand up to my mother, I would have laughed and said I didn't have it in me. Turns out I did. Turns out it was there all along, waiting for me to remember my own worth. Some roots survive. And when they do, they don't just hold you in place. They give you the courage to grow taller than the people who once tried to bury you. So here's to the peeling paint. To the creaky floors. To the lilacs I'll plant come spring. And to my father's promise, still standing after everything that tried to knock it down. This is mine. And so am I.